Oh, hit pause. Good morning. Harry, can you do one favor for me and hit the pause button, start the tape for me? I got busy and was chit-chatting and we're rushing over here, so I'm a little out of sorts, but good morning at home as well. We're glad you're joining us. Some different faces to catch up with here today. And believe it or not, last week we sat in here and we roasted to death, and now this week we are freezing. So I came over this morning. It should get warmer as the service goes on. We've already rose about 7 degrees, and I'm sure, as my husband would say, there's enough hot air coming out of me, so it'll get really good and warm in here. A couple of announcements. The flowers are for the beautification of the sanctuary. To try to keep in mind with that, I know last week we made the announcement that the church was closing. Most people know that. And we do have some upcoming things that we'd like to present to you now to let you know what's going on through the month of June. Next week, we will be doing communion. So if you would like to come out for that, you're more than welcome to. The following week will be what I'm calling BYOC, which is bring your own chair. And the reason why we're calling it that is we figured we would block off the parking lot like we did once before when we would have our services when COVID first hit and we had to be outside. And we're going to have a shortened service. The church will be providing a bag lunch with drink and some chips for everybody. We're not making it so that everybody has to bring something. I will be enlisting all of you, though, for setup and cleanup because we can't do it till that day, just in case it rains. And then this way we can take an opportunity to have fellowship together and a meal together one last time. At that time, we will also be providing to you a memento for you to take home. It is a prayer cross, which we will be providing that has Virga UMC on it, because prayer has always been a big part of this church. We've always passed the microphone, we've always done a prayer list, and we've made prayer shawls and everything like that. So figured that was a big part of this church and always was. So it would be something that in the future as you pray you can hold in the palm of your hand and know you still have a little piece of everyone here with you. The following week will be Father's Day, which we will be giving gifts out for all the fathers. So please bring out Dad or whoever, a special person in your life. And then the last week will be our last sermon, and that will be with Harry. And if you would like to join us for that, we would appreciate that. I have not gotten any additional information from the DS at this point. I will be getting more information over the next week or so. And at that point in time, I will be in touch. Many of you have graciously reached out to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you and offered some type of help or assistance. I will be taking you up on that. Don't think me not asking for something now means I'm not going to ask you. It's just I really don't know what the next steps are going to be over the next few weeks. Once I find out more information, I will try to share it as best I can. On a sad note, I'm assuming most of you know, Floss passed this week at home. So she is at peace, and that is something we are very grateful for. I will be putting the family on the prayer list. The boys need it. Their families need it. They are not asking for much right now. We will be getting more information, Harry and I, as time goes on. But I know that prayers are always welcomed because they're facing a lot of decisions and a road ahead of them they really hadn't planned on facing. So that makes it even harder. So I appreciate all of you who, again, have reached out. Like I said, as I find out more information, I will try to share it. I don't have my prayer list with me because, like I said, I kind of got caught off guard. I would like continued prayers for Joan. Her 2 daughters are here and her son-in-law, and that she's making enough progress that she's going to be going to Vermont. And that is great news. And we are thankful for that. And we also want prayers for them, not just for their travel, but for everything that they are going through as well. They know, you know that this congregation supports you no matter what. If you were to need something, please feel free to reach out. Is there an update or anything that you would like to say about your mom? Okay, so she might be joining us next week. An added bonus, if you come out for communion, you can also maybe see Joan. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best and pray for that to happen so we can see her. That would be wonderful. That's great news. I sort of know yours, Carolyn. I'm going to give it a shot. All servicemen home and away, our firefighters and police, Kathleen, Nancy, Cy, you, Rich, Walter, and Peggy. All right, I'm getting good. Finally, after 5 years, I think I finally got it right. There we go. I'm glad I could remember them. And that's one thing I've always kind of up here, a little bit of laughter, because, I like standing up here and seeing faces smiling, because it makes it a little easier. That's why I don't look at Aunt Bev, because Aunt Bev usually cries. So if you see me looking over, if you were actually here with us, you would know. There's 3 people sitting over here. Everybody's over here, and I'm not trying to ignore you. It's just I know if Aunt Bev cries, I'm going to lose it. So we're not going to get through this at all. So I'm trying to keep it together. Gary was out and said that Gary and Jenna are doing well, and so is little baby Gideon, so that's good news, and we're thankful for that. Kim handed me these that she made up, and I would like to, probably we'll put them out starting next week, and it's for your name and an address and a phone number and an email for you to, maybe we can get together a newer directory so that it would be something we could hand out for a way for us to all stay in touch and keep together. I would like that for everyone. I think, and if you're at home, maybe over the next few weeks, you can come out and join us. And if you're not comfortable, that's understandable. If you want to reach out to me, that's fine. Most of you have my phone number, my cell number. I will respond back with either my email or however you feel comfortable, or an address if you want to mail me something. And I will try to include you in that book as well. I can't think of, I'm trying to think who else is. I know I want to keep the Wannenberg, Schoberg, and Hankel family on our prayer list. I would also like to keep Patty and her daughter, Lisa. Patty is our cleaning person. She is grateful and appreciative that for all our church has done for her and her family. She reached out to me. She is going to graciously stay with us through June. And believe it or not, I did not know this. She has a church, but she reached out to me and said that she feels our church has done more for her and her daughter and prayed more for her and her daughter over the past months. And she's appreciative of that. She's truly grateful. So if there's anybody else that has anybody, Kim? Okay. Oh, at his churches. Does he have plans for retirement? Is he coming this way, going north, going south?
He's going out to, they bought a house in Heilsburg.
Okay.
Out near Kelly.
Okay. They're going to enjoy retired life. That is great news.
They're packing up and ready to go.
He was that way when he was hesitant and going down, and he did wonderful.
Yes.
So I'm sure the next step he's going to do just as great. But we'll keep him in our prayers. Is there anybody else? Jen?
Prayers for you, and I
Fred.
want to thank you for,
He called me.
you do everything for all of us. And sometimes I feel like there are a lot of burdens of this church. I want everybody to know that God will always provide. No matter what happens moving forward. Always holding all of our hands.
Thank you.
Aunt Bev, don't cry.
Too late, I already am, and I didn't even look at her, see? Oh, man, imagine if I'd have looked at her. Wow. Well, in 5 years, she's rubbed... Yeah, right. You're rubbing off on me. What can I say? Vince?
I just want to express prayers of joy and thanks to the Lord for the congregation prayers offered up for me over the years. 3 years ago, I went for treatment of prostate cancer. That is still non-existent.
Great.
A year and a half ago, I had a tumor in my bladder. That's been cleaned. And Parkinson's is still at bay right now, still in stage 1.
We'll keep you in our prayers. That's one thing I said. I know we didn't do this on the feed last week because we wanted to give everybody here a moment. And I had expressed at that point in time, for those of you at home, one of my biggest things is in that I pray for, even if I don't say it when I go to the Lord in prayer, I say it in my heart, and I know He hears it, is that each and every one of you will still be prayed for. And each and every one of you will not be out of our thoughts or out of our minds or out of our hearts. No matter whether we stay in touch, see each other, whatever happens, we're all in each other's lives from here through eternity. So please remember that and let that give you strength and hope, because that's something no one can take away from you, ever. So at this time, we'll go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord, I'm grateful for the opportunity to stand up here before these people. They're wonderful people. They're great Christians in every sense of the word. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to have been with them for as long as we've had in here. And I'm not saying it's ending, because it's not. It's only if we let go, and I don't plan on letting go. I ask that you bless each one of them as we face what we face for the next few weeks, and even after, for there will be trials, there will be tests, and there will be ups and downs. As Vincent mentioned, he's been through much in these past years. But not only the congregation, but you got him through that. We know what your power is, and we are all grateful for it. That is why our prayer list is so strong with you. We know that who we bring before you, you will touch. You will provide for them. I ask that you be with the Baxter family this week and the weeks to come. They face a road I know I've walked, but it's one made even harder when it comes the way it did. Please help them through and let them know that there are others caring, and give them peace. And please be with those whose names we did not mention. I know there are names that are in our hearts and in our minds, and that maybe people at home who are joining us are saying, reach out and touch them, and touch the person who whispered their name. Give them the comfort and peace in knowing. And as I always like to do, to end on a happy note, I'm truly grateful that we got the air conditioner fixed. You have no idea. But I think it's a little ironic that we needed heat today. But I'm grateful for both. We ask all these things as we join together in the prayer you taught us to say. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Pat, here. Here you go. I got that. That's all I have. A couple of them were kind of used, but that's okay. Don't put that on the tape.
I work with 4 to 6-year-olds.
Oh, my. First of all, a note about the situation with Floss. I've been in contact with the family almost daily. What I know is this. As of this moment, as I sit here at 11:15 on Sunday morning, here's what the plan is. The plan is to have a graveside service for Floss that anybody would be invited to attend. It will not be in a church or at a funeral home, but rather at the graveside. She has been cremated, so there's no body to have to wait for. And that's part of the complication about picking the time has to do with when the cremation is done and all that type of thing. So the bottom line is we had hoped to have the answer for you today in church. We expected to be able to give you the date today, but we will have to send it out with our text messages and phone calls and all. We'll get in touch with you as soon as Pat and I learn when it will be, and if you can make it, you feel free to come, but we will let you know when that's going to happen. Next week, we said, is June the 6th, and we're going to have communion at the end of the service today. At the very end of the service, we have an announcement about that to make, but that won't be till the end of the service. Then on June the 13th, remember, as Pat said, we're only going to meet in here till 11:30. And by 11:30, the church service will be over, and at that time, we will pray for a much better weather than today. We will exit to the parking lot where nobody's going to be allowed to park that day, including Pat, me, or anybody else, and we're going to have this incredible meal catered by, I think it's Chez Wawa, I believe it's called. Is that who it's on? It's a French restaurant, Chez Wawa. And then on June the 20th is Father's Day. We opted not to do the party on the 20th because it was Father's Day, just in case that conflicted. But one thing I will say, next week, Pat hopes to take a survey with people who are here to ask how many we think will be coming on the 13th, so you can get kind of a head count as to how much food to get. So if you're here today, but you know you're not going to be here next week, but then you plan to come back when we have the shindig on the 13th, see Pat afterwards today. That would help her with her count. Then on the 27th will be the last service here at Virga, and on that day we have a very kind of a special treat for you. Jerry Martin will be back at the organ, and we will have full music raining once again here with the organ in the church. Jerry said she'll be here and she's going to play like crazy, and we will sing and everything else. So that will happen on June the 27th. Need tissue? You can. I'm pointing at you. Yes. On that jovial note, speaking of jovial notes, I don't have to give a Vince joke today from Vermont because VV, Vince of Vermont, is here in person. Vince, the pressure's on you now to be as funny as I am when I try to be you. Which won't be hard to do. Yeah, go ahead. The hand mic's not working.
I'm
sorry.
known as the jokes. Some people say I missed my time.
Yeah. I'm taking a risk, folks. I haven't vetted this joke ahead of time, so go ahead.
So little Billy's misbehaving, and his mother sends him up to his room. So he's up in his room, and he comes downstairs after a little while, and he says, Mom, I had a chance to think about it, he says, and I said a prayer to God. And she says, well, that's good. You asked for God's help to stop misbehaving. He says, well, I didn't ask him to help stop misbehaving. I asked him to help you put up with me.
That's pretty good, Vince. It's also pretty realistic, which is why it's pretty funny. Yeah, that's the real. All right, we'll do a postscript with it. Okay. Well, anyway, as I said, as I'm getting finished with my ministry, it's a wonderful joy for me to be able to talk about the gospel of the book of John. because it's my very favorite gospel lesson. John is such a remarkable guy when you think about it. You know, he writes the final gospel message. He is the last of the living disciples. He's called the beloved disciple. Jesus calls him the one he loved. And, you know, he's when Jesus was on the cross being crucified, it's John. He says, John, when I die, I want you to take care of my mom. He puts John in charge of that. And then, of course, what happens after all the disciples are gone, John gets exiled to this island of Patmos. He's in his 90s, and he's given the revelation of Jesus Christ, and he authors the final book of the Bible. What an amazing guy. 5 books of our New Testament by John, the Gospel, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation. 5 books. So we are into his Gospel, and we are now up to chapter 18. We're getting close to the end, but in 18, we're going to set the scene for you, and it's where Jesus is arrested. He's going to be ready to get put on trial. Let me set the scene for you. Jesus has finished praying for his disciples and for his followers. He has said prayers for them and has asked blessings for them. And at that point, he then takes his disciples with him to this olive grove. And in the olive grove, they are going to be fairly close to the temple. Now, I tried to figure this out. I think I'm pretty close to what I'm about to say. If we here were in the olive grove, the temple was probably located just a little bit closer than West Deptford High School. We all know where West Deptford High School is down the street there. And we are probably about roughly the same distance from this church to West Deptford High School as the olive grove was to the temple. The temple may have even been a little bit closer. So it's not very far away. And that's the setting. Now, what's happened? Okay, they're in the olive grove, and one of the disciples is missing. We all know which one. Judas. Because Judas has been entered into by Satan. We talked about Satan going into just one person. And he has betrayed Jesus, and he has gone and gotten some of these soldiers to come with him. And he knows where Jesus is, because remember, he was one of them, and he knows when they're going to go relax, they're going to go to this olive grove. So Judas brings the soldiers with him where Jesus is resting. Now, you'll note in the scripture that they are carrying lanterns and torches. Obviously, it's nighttime. Something that the scripture doesn't really tell us, though, is that they probably didn't need them. Because if it was a clear night, we know one thing, there was a full moon. Why do we know there's a full moon? Because Passover is, goes around the moon. Lunar formations are what kind of dictate these different holidays and so forth. And there's a Passover moon that's up there, the full moon, so it's probably a rather very well-lit evening. And they have these torches on top of that. And when they come there, Jesus is going to say to them, "What do you want?" Now, you might think that's kind of odd if you were a casual reader of the Bible. How come Jesus doesn't know what they want? Well, he knows exactly what they want. Jesus, over and over again in the Bible, will ask questions that are actually rhetorical questions. A rhetorical question is one where you ask a question, but you know the answer. Remember, he is called teacher. Remember when Nicodemus, back in John chapter 3, goes to meet Jesus at night, he calls him teacher. He says, "Teacher." And then from that, of course, Jesus is going to say, "I tell you the truth," in John 3:16. So he's a great teacher. Teachers can teach best by asking their kids questions to get the kids engaged, to get them involved. So Jesus asks these questions. He knows the answer, but he wants them to say, why are they there? So they're going to tell him why they're there. You're under arrest. And what does Jesus do? He complies. He does not resist. He's about to be taken unjustly by the guy who, has betrayed him and these evil people, and he goes willingly, does so for two reasons. Number one, he has to. If he doesn't go with them, if he doesn't get crucified, he doesn't accomplish what he's come to accomplish. Secondly, he also does it probably to help his men out. Because if he offers any kind of resistance, what's going to happen? Well, the disciples that are there, they're going to probably jump up and try to get in there and duke it out or something like that and try to prevent him from being taken. And Jesus doesn't want them being hurt. Despite that fact, one of the disciples has his own idea. That would be our good friend Pete. Peter goes, "You aren't taking him." And he draws his sword and he goes whack. And one of the servants of the high priest, Peter managed to sever his ear right off, like that, lops his ear right off. And Jesus says to him, "Stop it. Put your sword away. I must go with them." Let's see how John describes this verse by verse in the scripture. Joyce, would you please read for us John chapter 18, beginning at verse 1, and we'll take a look at it up here on the screen.
When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you that I am he," Jesus answered. "If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?"
I read this and I thought of one thing. It's kind of weird. I don't mean to digress. But he cuts off the servant's ear, right? And what does it say? The servant's name was Malchus. And I think to myself, with all due respect, who cares? I mean, I'm thinking, why does this guy manage to get his name into the Bible, and yet like the woman at the well just becomes the woman at the well, It's very interesting when you think about it, some of the things that are in the Bible and some that aren't. And yet at the very end of this gospel, John is going to say, if I were to have included everything that Jesus had done and all the details, there wouldn't be enough books in the whole world to fill up, what has been done. So I don't always know why things are there and why they aren't. If we were doing a Bible study back on Wednesday nights, Mark here would have said to me, "Harry, why do you mention that guy by name?" And I would have said to you, "I don't know, Mark." And he'd say, "That's not an answer." Okay. But anyway, interesting thing. He cuts off this guy's ear, whose name gets mentioned. But that's all that John says about it. But that's not all the gospel accounts, plural, say about it. If you take a look at Luke chapter 22, remember Luke is the physician. So he's interested in healing. He says this, "And one of them," that's Peter, "smote the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. And Jesus answered and said, 'Suffer ye thus far.' And he touched his ear, and he healed him." If you ever see a motion picture of this scene, it's a very, very emotional and powerful thing because Peter whacks off the ear, and I guess the ear probably falls to the ground or whatever, and Jesus, goes over and either picks the ear up or whatever he does, he touches, and just like that, supernaturally, the ear is reattached and he's as good as new. Jesus doesn't want any violence. He doesn't want that to happen. But what happens next? Well, you may or may not know this, but the Jews had a tradition at that time. They used to have what you might call high priest of the year. Every year they kind of rotated. They have a different high priest. The year that this happens, they have a high priest. His name is Caiaphas. Caiaphas is the high priest. Now, it's interesting because Caiaphas is the father-in-law of a guy named Annas. So they're related. I guess, obviously, Annas is married to Caiaphas' daughter. So Caiaphas is the main honcho, but Annas is like the big high priest and his father-in-law. So what happens is that Jesus gets taken first to Annas. Annas is the guy he gets taken to first. Now, this guy Annas has got a very bad reputation. He is a notorious individual. He's a guy that's known for being very harsh, for being very stringent, for being very vindictive. So he's not the kind of guy you want to go to and stand before when you are being under arrest. Now, Jesus, when he comes to Annas, is bound, so we don't know for sure. It doesn't tell us. Either his hands are tied and bound in front of him, or his hands are tied and bound behind him. In recent years, more often than not, what happens in like police, today, or the old Wild West on Gunsmoke or whatever, what they usually do the bounding behind here, and they get the person's arms behind and put handcuffs on them, right? Back then, with Jesus, it was probably more common and easier to have the guy put his hands out here and to bind them here. So he's probably out in front, but it doesn't matter. Either way, Jesus has no use of his arms and his hands. He is bound tight. So what happens is that as he's bound, he's getting grilled by this guy Annas, and Annas doesn't like his answers, so he goes over to Jesus and he takes his hand and he smacks him across the face, and probably smacks him a couple times, which is not only hurtful, but very degrading. When a man, especially back then, that's man-dominated society, when a man goes over and just slaps around another man in the face, you're degrading him as much as you possibly can. So Annas is very frustrated with Jesus. He wants to do more than just slap him around, but finally he says, you know what? I've had it. It's enough of this guy. Take him to Caiaphas. You know what? I might be the high priest, but Caiaphas is the high priest of the year. Let's see how he handles the scene. And he's off to Caiaphas. Meanwhile, somebody else is doing something. Peter. Where's Pete? Well, Pete's not there because they've captured Jesus. They've taken him over to the temple. They've bound him, and the high priest are there. And Peter is left outside, if you will, and it's chilly. Think of being in Philadelphia at the end of March. Very similar weather to being in Jerusalem at the end of March. Very similar weather, Philadelphia and Jerusalem. It actually is. So what happens is that Peter's outside, and he's kind of chilly, so he gets by the fire. And he starts to warm himself by the fire, and somebody says, hey, you there. You're one of his disciples, aren't you? He goes, no, not me. No, not me. I don't know him. A little while later, warming himself by the fire, somebody else asks him, and again he goes, no, not me. Finally, a third time, and now Peter gets angry. I don't know the man. And then what happens? We all know. The cock crows. And what does Peter do? He pulls a Bev. I just thought that up. That wasn't in the message at all. But it's so appropriate. He weeps. Okay. Bev's laughing now, though. But Peter cries. He goes, I don't believe it. I told Jesus I would never, ever betray him. And he told me, I tell you, Pete, before the cock crows, you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter says, you got to be kidding me. And what happens? Exactly what Jesus said would happen happened. How did he know? Maybe God or something, you know? And Peter weeps. He is so sad because he has let down his Lord, and his Lord knew that he would. Meanwhile, back at the temple, well, things aren't going any better with Caiaphas. What's going to happen? Jesus gets grilled by Caiaphas. He doesn't get any further with Jesus than Annas did. And so Caiaphas says, I've got the answer. You know what? Enough of this stuff. We got to get this guy out of our hair. We're going to send him to the Roman governor. We're sending him off to see Pilate. Okay? So that's what's going to happen. Caiaphas is going to say, let's send him off to see the Roman governor. And with that, we're going to bring on Bonnie. Not Rep, right? Okay. Bonnie is going to do chapter 18, beginning at the 28th verse. Here's what's going to happen when Jesus is going to the Roman governor.
They then led Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then they said Pilate unto them, Take ye him, and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not unlawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die.
Thank you, Bonnie. You know, it's interesting that they don't want to go in there. They don't want to defile themselves. It's okay to send an innocent person to death, but they don't want to go inside there where the governor is, because that wouldn't be clean, you know, and then they wouldn't be able to eat the Passover meal. Wow. So they've got a problem. They want Jesus dead, period, case closed. They want him dead. They want him crucified, and they don't have the ability to do it. Remember what we have going on here. The Romans controlled most of the known world at that time. The Romans were amazingly good at governing. They were very, very successful. And they would allow people to have some freedom. They would allow the Jews to be Jews and so forth. But they didn't want any big insurrections. And they didn't want any problems that would cause hysteria or mass problems against the Romans. They also didn't let anybody other than Romans be in charge of doing any executions, because they didn't want people taking the law into their own hands. So the Jews have the freedom to be Jews. They have the freedom to go talk to Pilate and so forth. But they know in order to get Jesus executed, they can't do it. Only Pilate can give the okay. Without his okay, they don't have anything. So now we're set for this amazing, incredible interchange between Jesus and Pilate. Let's go through a few verses. First of all, we're going to take a look at John chapter 18, beginning at verse 33. Is it up there? Yep, there we go. John 18, verse 33 says this. Pilate then went back inside the palace. He summoned Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Is that your own idea, Jesus asked? Or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priest handed you over to me. What is it you've done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, you say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Wow. What is truth? You know, you could sit around, we could have a whole hour-long discussion on the definition of the word truth. You know, it's hard to do logical definitions for words that are not tangible. Like, for instance, what is a chair? Well, you can't say a chair is something you sit on. You know that? Why not? Because right now, I'm sitting. I'm not on a chair. I'm on a stool. Landon, you're sitting there. You're not on a chair. You're on a bench or a pew. A chair is a seat primarily designed for one person that has legs and a back. That's right, like that. That's a chair. So you can logically define a chair, and it's not that hard to logically define a chair. What is truth? That's not so easy to define. We do know that Pilate and Jesus are going to have a conversation about truth. We don't know exactly what Jesus tells him, but we do know one thing. Pilate is awed. He is just overcome with this incredible man before him. There's something special about this guy, Jesus. In fact, he's going to call him the King of the Jews. So, Pilate is convinced that he is going to go out there and recommend that Jesus is not going to be put to death. There's going to be this choice between Jesus and Barabbas. Barabbas is a hardened criminal. He's a murderer. He's a really bad guy. And one prisoner has to get released. So what's going to happen? Let's take a look at John chapter 19, verses 1 to 3. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. And they went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they slapped him in the face. He had him whipped. They had back then this kind of whip thing that was made out of these like pieces of bone. They were very, very sharp. So when you took this whip and put it across the back of a man, it'd be like he'd be getting hit with razor blades on the sharp end. And it would just cut that skin and make that man bleed. Very, very, very painful. So what happens is he gets whipped. You know, Pilate allows him to get whipped, and then these soldiers totally degrade him. They take this crown of thorns, and they say, you want to be a king? Here you are, here's your crown. And they put the thorns crush into his head and make his forehead bleed, the blood coming down on his forehead, the blood all over his back and everything else. And then they They spit on him, they spank him, they do everything they can. They put this purple robe on him. Purple was, of course, the color of deity, of royalty. And they do this to mock him totally. And what happens? Verses 4 to 6 happens. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no charge of a basis against him." There's a better translation than "this is the man," and it's this. What Pilate mostly says is this: "Behold the man. Look at him. I've had him whipped. He's been scourged. He's had this thing put on his head. Enough is enough. Let's release Barabbas and not hurt this man." But they've gotten the crowd together to yell, "Crucify, crucify, crucify." Well, Pilate knows that Jesus is innocent. He is positive that Jesus is somebody very special. He knows there's no way he can have him be put to death. We all know what happens, though, don't we? He's going to let it happen. And next week, we're going to examine just why Pilate does what he does. And better than that, we're going to relate it to us today in the year 2021. How do we relate what Pilate does back then to what we experience in our lives today? You know, when I tell you to come back next week to hear what's going to happen, it reminds me of a story that I've loved very much. I might have shared with you once before, but that's okay. It's about a guy named Dwight L. Moody. Dwight L. Moody was an incredible Protestant evangelist, probably the greatest evangelist in this country before Billy Graham. And Dwight L. Moody would get out there and gather people, and he would give great talks for Jesus. And one Sunday morning in Chicago, he's giving this great sermon. And at the end of the sermon, he says, "Okay, now, I'm stopping there. I'm going to stop right there. And next week, you come back right here, and I'm going to tell you how you can be saved. Next week, not now, I'm going to tell you next week how you can be saved." Isn't that great? Well, something funny happened. That week in Chicago, they had something called the Great Chicago Fire. Hundreds of people died. All kinds of places were burned down. And the place where Dwight L. Moody stood and gave his message, and the seating where everybody sat to listen to him, it was all gone. You know what Dwight L. Moody said? "Never again, never again will I ever give a sermon and not tell people how to be saved that day. The salvation message must be part of every sermon I ever give." Today is Memorial Day weekend. It's a Sunday. In the United States of America, I don't know how many people are in pulpits and so forth giving messages, but I would hope that there's not one person preaching anywhere in this country today who's not giving the salvation message. And I can tell you this. I'm having you come back next week to find out why Pilate did what he did and how it relates to us, but you don't have to come back next week to find out how to be saved. We know that already. This one who was executed, this Jesus the Christ, he got executed for one reason. He died for our sins. And if you believe in him, you will have everlasting life. What an incredible joy. What an incredible thing. It's Memorial Day weekend. What more wonderful person to memorialize than Jesus Christ? We know so many people died for our country, and that's so beautiful. How about a Savior who died for the whole world so that you and I one day could live forever? Amen. Let's say together, stay seated, let's say together the belief in our faith of all this. It's called the Apostles' Creed. Ready? I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only. Thank you. May the Lord now watch between you and me while we're absent one from the other. Amen. Okay, don't leave for 1 minute. Gary, I hope that's the end of the tape. Yay, goodbye. Nice seeing you.
Once that screen comes up, you're okay.
Okay.